hardly a yawning gap to Tadej Pogačar. I think I've lost Danny.
Sorry, Carlton, Mike was off there. Yeah, as Sean said, this really isn't over. There's, you know, no established breakaway. There's so much action behind that it really hasn't settled yet. So I think it will be a case of getting over this climb. Then there's that 11-kilometre descent you mentioned, and then it's back up to the third Category 1 climb of the day. And then after that, that'll be a good indicator of where everyone's lying on the road and the intent of those GC teams behind, and if they're happy with the composition of the break.
Rui Costa has dropped back to pick up Carapaz. This looks like a master plan, Sean.
Yes, well, I think we see Rui Costa yesterday. He was in difficulty, and I think the best man, Carapaz, they're trying to get him across here. As we can see, he does his job. I'm not sure if he waited up. I think in the beginning of the climb, maybe. Yeah, it was a little bit more explosive for him, but he's done his job here now, and Carapaz is going to bridge across, and that's what we could see as we came through the intermediate sprint point. The peloton was really being pushed along by a number of teams and riders coming across, and Carapaz is the one who was going to make it here. But yeah, we can see yeah, the peloton at the moment, 124 back. It'll be interesting to see what is happening back there. Will it settle down now on this break? Could be a one could you know, push on, but it's all on at the moment. And yeah, 124 with still the 6+ kilometers to go. This is nothing. If these teams want to really push on, well, then this could also come back very quickly.
Potentially a more relaxed atmosphere, I would say, at UAE Team Emirates after the display yesterday, Danny. If you've got somebody like Carapaz up the road, he's not going to be a threat. And to be honest, I don't think Tadej Pogačar is that concerned, surely, to be pushing on for bonus seconds when they have the level of control that they do at the moment and the gap they have at the top.
I mean, never say never for Tadej Pogačar. I think he's made that clear that defensive isn't in his vocabulary. However, no, Carapaz will not be a threat. 50 minutes and 35 seconds on the general classification. And taking all of the interviews that we've seen overnight from UAE, I do think they will ride a more defensive race today. If you look at that final climb and the last 3 kilometers specifically, it definitely suits the attributes of Jonas Vingegaard over Tadej Pogačar. Yesterday, Tadej Pogačar on the less steep section was able to profit off the satellite rider of Adam Yates and use his explosive attributes to launch his attack when he did. So they don't have to put any more time into, you know, the rivals, Jonas Vingegaard being the biggest one here. And I think they will ride more defensively today, at least until the final few kilometers of the final climb.
I was just checking on the points tally of Carapaz in the King of the Mountains competition, because there's so many up for grabs at the moment. I was actually thinking, gosh, he could start assembling a challenge in the polka dots. 2 back-to-back mountaintop finishes. Normally, when we get this deep in the race, you'd perhaps expect the organisers to at least throw in one descending finish. Well, not a bit of it. They are indeed here to punish, it seems. It's whether you can actually take that punishment today. And here is Tadej Pogačar. No hurry, just for the time being. And this group's starting to swell. We were battered at the top of the day. Sean's gone for some fried fish. We have Robbie McEwen, who's just installing himself. We'll be coming to Robbie in a short while. But what an amazing start to today we have had. Blown apart at the very beginning. We had a feisty breakaway that was starting to form and then deform and then reform again, as we see now. The pursuers, including Simon Yates and a few others as well. Mikko Kwiatkowski's drifted back out of the front group. Ben Healy, who's starting to think about coming back up. Romain Bardet, who was lively at the top of the day. This being Bastille Day, you'd expect that. Front group with just Lenny Martinez and Jordan Jega, who's one of the first starters of Guillaume Martin as well. 3 Frenchmen up front on Bastille Day. This is the national holiday, and a man who's going to hold his little flag up and guide us indeed over this next climb is Robbie McEwen. Robbie, a nightmare for some. If you can cope with these kind of inclines, an absolute joy.
Yeah, it's a day of contrasts.
We have to invest to really, it's a perfect scenario for us without killing, but we have to keep it rolling.
So just braking to take a listen to the, well, not so much instructions, but just a confirmation that they're doing the right thing, really, keeping things rolling. The boys from Red Bull Bora Hansgrohe just really need to keep the pace on and keep pushing, and they've had to pivot as a team completely since the demise in this race of Primož Roglič.
Robbie, just as you join us, we've got Michael Matthews on screen. That little skirmish that we saw on the intermediate sprint, I know the commissaires are on a hair trigger at the moment. Did Binny do much wrong in your view? I think he went defensive. Let's describe that first, but he did. He was ahead. He had the right to take the apex of the corner if he wanted it, and he clearly wanted it. But what do you think the repercussions will be? I mean, the amount of effort he put into it, if there is any sanction, I'm going to feel desperately sorry for him, even as leader of the green jersey.
Well, it remains to be seen. As you said, the commissaires have been on the hair trigger when it's come to relegations and the way they're interpreting sprints. The difficulty is when the road slings left, right, and there isn't an apex in it, you're entitled to ride a straight line from corner to corner. You don't have to follow the bend of the barriers, but yeah, there was an element of interference. Whether it really would have made a difference, I don't know. But even I wouldn't be bothered if they just said, you know what, we'll just reverse the placings.
Yeah.
I think the difference here, though, is why, you know, Matthews was going for these points in the first place.
Yeah,
and they're not going to dispute that, surely, because, you know, he had 12 points at the start of today. So, you know, to me, yes, the commissaires need to be consistent in their approach, in what they're doing and how they are, you know, making these decisions on the road. However, surely from the Jayco Alula team, there's going to be no, you know, dispute as to really forcing the DQ or regulation of the points for Binny and Girmay.
No, they won't as a team, but the commissaires will look at it in any case like they've looked at absolutely everything and then some in the sprints themselves. They've picked out stuff that, you know, you wouldn't have imagined have ever been looked at before. Relegating riders in the 25th and 28th position for coming together at a kilometre to go and stuff like that. That was on the day that Mark Cavendish won. Davide Ballerini got relegated. He was miles back, but so yeah, I don't know if they'll actually do anything with it. And in the end, it's not going to make a difference to any of them. I think Binny's got the green jersey wrapped up anyway. Matthews, it was of no consequence to him. So yeah, I don't know why he really even bothered going for it. And in any case, he's pivoted himself because he started to help Simon Yates to try and get his main man into the break, and Yates has had a difficult tour, and it'd be good to see him get up the road and maybe pick up a little bit of the form of his twin brother.
He had a good day yesterday as well, let's not forget. He was 4th on GC last year, so he's got the capacity, that's for sure. So it's a perfect day for him. Interestingly, just looking at the peloton behind, it seems like roles reversed compared to yesterday. Laporte was on the front for Team Visma Lisa Bike, so they are wanting to take control early on today's stage, which I think just shows the intent of what they're going to try and do today.
They're calling on him. Jersey unzipped, the European champion, as he just tries to set his tempo, dragging everybody else up behind him just for the time being. You can see Visma Lisa Bike just tucked in. Jonas Vingegaard, I'm just wondering whether today is the day where they're going to have to make something of a statement in response to yesterday. The gap starting to yawn just a little bit at the top, with Tadej Pogačar now with an advantage of 1:57, don't forget, over Jonas Vingegaard. Remco Evenepoel discussing his position earlier today, saying that he saw two guys in front of him that he thought would be his main challenge. He's more than comfortable with his position as being closest man to them. So I'm presuming he'll take his chances when he can, but podium place, not bad for your debut on the tour, Robbie.
No, very good if you can finish on the podium. And we heard Remco Evenepoel's interview this morning at the start, sort of confirming that he's in it for a podium place and he's protecting that third place, not planning anything crazy. And at the moment, I don't mind that. I don't think it's a lack of ambition. I think he can be very pleased with himself where he stands currently, and getting through a day like today intact and then holding that third position, I think will be mission accomplished on this stage. Then as the race develops further, I think he can have the ambition, albeit a bit of a back burner ambition, to maybe do something special if the situation presents itself, or maybe the other two crack, Pogacar and Vingegaard simultaneously have a bad day. Remco has an awesome one. And even just keeping himself within reach of maybe Jonas when it comes to that final time trial, and Remco will back himself to not only win it, be able to take a decent chunk of time, and who knows then.
Yeah, I agree with you, Robbie. You know, we discussed it, didn't we, at length on the breakaway, and we were reading into that interview of Remco, and it was very, very clear that podium position for him will be a job well done. And we're talking about riders having good and bad days, and for sure today he'll just be in a situation where he can follow. He's been hugely consistent so far, and then maybe he will look at opportunities later down the line.
Jai Hindley and Bob Jongels doing their job for Bora Hansgrohe, Red Bull Bora Hansgrohe. And look at this beautiful lassé, isn't it? And our finale today is across the blade of a ridge where you've got the mountain falls away on either side. It's an absolutely spectacular finish. We finished on the Col de Mont in the past. It is being ridden at the moment in a kind of a holding tempo, I think it's fair to say. The time gaps haven't really changed that much. There's a few trying to bridge over here. Only 25 seconds in arrears is the Simon Yates group. You just see them coming around the corner, or remnants of them. Oscar Onley riding brilliantly today as well. It's only 90 seconds, however, back to Tadej Pogacar and the main body of the peloton. So yet again, Robbie, a day of big drama, where the gaps have been held, to be honest, partially I think because of the descents that we've had, which characterised much of today, and we've got a technical one coming up over the top.
Well, the thing is that it's been under the impetus of either UAE or Visma. The gaps have been being held really short to the breakaways as Healy and Simon Yates. They're making inroads. They're coming across this gap. Even Healy just overtaking Yates and really making well, this is a big push, not a turn. This is just an acceleration to try and cross it as soon as he can. And that's sometimes what happens. Some would say, wouldn't he be better just riding a tempo across the gap? But Ben Healy's also that type of rider. If he has the moment where he feels good, feels strong, he's just, I've got to use it now while I've got it. And he's going to blast his way across to the back of the group. Well,
he actually knows the climb. They've done their homework here as well. It flattens out to, you can't quite see it, but there's a little 4%er. It says 10% on the graphic on your screen, but just that little step. It's a very modest one in the middle, offering up something on this climb.
Very modest.
Very modest, yeah, but enough for a terrier to go after the bone. Absolutely brilliant. I think, Danny, when they say Healy's coming up over the radio, there must be a few shoulders drop.
Yeah, I mean, it's remarkable, isn't it? He really has got the heart of a lion. He fights and fights again, and you know, it was great to have Jonathan Walters in with us yesterday, and he was just explaining how, you know, they almost have to hold him back because he is so keen every single day to try and get into the breakaway. Brilliant. You know, he had that brilliant win in Slovenia, didn't he? And his time will come. I truly believe that, you know, and the way he rides is truly inspiring, and yet again, he is in the break.
Here's the moment again, Robbie. Talk us through it.
Okay, well, this is the first time I'm actually seeing it. Biniam Gourmet going across, I think, enough to get him put behind, and he has been. Look at that. Biniam Gourmet put back to third in the group, so behind his own teammate, Menkes. So that is the rule as it's written on paper. If you are relegated to the last position of the group you are sprinting in. So they deemed that he is sprinting in the same group as his teammate Louis Menkes. So Matthews gets the intermediate sprint. And now seeing that's the first time I've actually seen the footage, it's enough to reverse placing or put him to the back of that group. So I guess he can think himself lucky that the whole group wasn't in the wheel, or he would have been out of the points.
And I think fair enough, you know, for the UCI, the rules are the rules at the end of the day, and they have to be consistent, like I said before.
Yeah, now that I've seen it, I'm like, yes, 100%. What have we got there, Carlton? The memorial of, there's the Ocana, but also...
Time to hear from John, I think.
Sadly coming up another memorial over the next climb. We'll talk about that when we get there.
Yeah, that will be the moment with Fabio Casartelli died. We will come to that memorial a little later on. That particular one we just saw was when Luis Ochana crashed whilst wearing the yellow jersey back in 1971 and was forced to retire on the Col de Monte on the descent from that climb.
Well, we're ever mindful, of course, of the fragility of riders, and indeed the apart from the helmets, there isn't much body protection out there, so we just wish everybody the very best on what will be a technical descent as we come up and over the top. As you've already heard, it has history, some of which is rather painful to bear. 2.5 kilometres until we get to the top. This race has been amazing. What an amazing addition. But 2 uphill finishes in the Pyrenees of this magnitude, Robbie. I was expecting at least one of them to be a descent before the course design was released, and this was always going to be a pivotal weekend, and so it's proving, I am sure.
Oh, the Pyrenees always play such a pivotal role in the Tour de France, and you get down in this part of France, these climbs are brutal. The gradients are steep. So that what characterises the Pyrenees in relation to the Alps is the Pyrenees are generally more jagged, steeper, less consistent climbs in their gradients, also in their turns. The roads are a little bit rougher, and it's generally hotter as well, a little bit further south here.
Certainly got heat today.
Yeah,
30 Celsius plus we're talking at some points. I'm just wondering who can sustain it better. The word is that Tadej Pogačar does not like overly hot conditions, and Vingegaard can bear that to a greater degree. We'll see. When it comes to temperature, Danny, how did you sustain it?
I loved it. I feel like I should have been born in a hot country because I rode the World Championships in Doha and I was absolutely fine. And it's really interesting because it's very, very individual, but for today, you know, the riders have to take a huge amount of consideration into the heat and what that will add to the fatigue of these riders and how much they're going to have to fuel throughout, not just with hydration, but with sustenance and carbs. And they'll be looking at 120 grams per hour. And that is hard to do when you're racing on these climbs and then on the descents, because you just can't take it on board when you're so focused from start to finish.
Just a quick word on the temperature out here. It's 27 degrees, but it certainly feels a lot hotter than that. No shelter at all. The riders pouring with sweat, asking us for bottles. Just went past Ben Turner of English Grenadiers, asked for me to pour water over him. Stevie Williams as well, just in front, or just behind Bruno Amirai. Some real classy bike riders being punted out, but it's these hot, hot conditions, and we've still got so far to go. Stefan Kung, drenched in sweat, up this climb. This race has exploded. It really, really has. Back to the commentators.
Thank you, Matt. Just hearing about the punishing temperatures. Likewise, by the way, in the Giro d'Italia women's race, which is going on, you can catch up with that, of course. And an amazing race, separated the two leaders by only a second going into stage 8. What an amazing contest that is turning out to be. And also, we have the Tour de l'Ain on your screens. You can catch up with highlights of that and live in the company of Jez Cox and indeed Brian Smith. Giro d'Italia Women, hosted by Marty McDonald and Joe Rousel. There is a raft of entertainment for you in this sport that we love, and today is a pivotal moment as we head to Plateau de Bay. It is a mountain that has, in the past, defined the Tour itself. We'll see today whether the gaps are magnified between our leaders. I feel that the cut-off point as well may account for a few today, Robbie.
It could well do, and this is one of those really dangerous days for the sprinters when you start straight up a climb like they did today of 7 kilometres long. If you distance right from kilometre 0 as it's just raining attacks, you find yourself with an uphill battle, as they say, quite literally.
Here's one, and we know teams have got illness washing through their team. We know that Geraint Thomas has been struggling, and Egan Bernal is as well, Danny.
Yeah, that's clear to see, and I just think this has to be illness, surely, from Egan Bernal. He's obviously not where he was a few years ago. However, he came into this Tour looking to try and stay up there on the general classification. We know Geraint Thomas has tested positive for COVID, as has Tom Pidcock, who has left this race. We just hope it doesn't get to the true top of this race and upset that GC battle. But like you said, Carlton, today is really a day where it's either going to upset the GC or confirm it further.
Feels that way. We've got just over 950 metres before we get to the top here. And it's quite a spiteful climb, this one. There's no respite as you get to the top. It'll swing around 7% at the very axis of it, and then we have this technical descent. And wanting to get there first, as you can see, at least for the time being, Movistar being extraordinarily busy, and Alex Aramburu is setting the pace at the moment, and others would quite frankly like to join the fun. This is drama personified, Robbie, and we're not even a third of the way through the day.
No, well, the stage profile, and I think the organisers anticipated this. They've put together a parcours today that just begged for aggression right from the very start. We haven't seen breakaways be successful in the mountain stages so far. I mean, the tour started in a very unique way for Tour de France, with the first 2 stages being won from breaks, both being won by Frenchmen. But since then, the breaks have been really controlled. We've had UAE and Visma Lisa Bike just dragging everything back in, and the breaks not getting much love. And today, you can see there's just so much determination now as the tour is about to enter its final week to just make one of these breaks work. And we've got the firepower up front to do it.
We have. Danny, we saw Lenny Martinez looking like he was struggling earlier on. Then he looked like he'd found his mojo. And now he's struggling again by the looks of him. Just a few moments ago, he was really stamping on the pedals to try and get to this peak, this apex, before he can start descending and maybe put some power back in the legs. But if you get tailed off at a moment like this, it's going to be a big cost.
It's going to be a really big cost, and it goes back to kind of fueling strategy and kind of core body temperature strategy as well. And today is a day where you can go through so many feelings throughout the race, feeling good, feeling bad, and everything in between. And it's about managing yourself, managing your effort throughout the stage, and looking at what your goal is as a team, and then using your efforts as a bike rider effectively. So yeah, it does look like it's going to be one of those days where you've just got to try and look after yourself really effectively throughout.
Carapaz just bouncing here. Ben Healy, I think, is just about 6 wheels further back. He's made himself, making himself get up towards the peak. There's mountain points up for grabs as well. They're well worth having if you're in a situation such as this. A lot of them as well, worth sprinting for. Let's see who gets it on the throw, Robbie.
Well, it was the Movistar rider who got there in front of Richard Carapaz. It was Javier Romo, I believe, that Alex Aramburu was setting the pace for. Enric Mas sitting a bit further back, but Javier Romo coming into today in the King of the Mountains competition was exactly nowhere.
But there's 60 points on offer today, and I think it was Tadej Pogačar was leading that
56.
competition, 56 exactly. So that can turn around so much, and still with the amount of climbing and high category climbs that we've got left to come in this tour, that competition is still very much open.
And that was my point. He was exactly nowhere coming into today, but then taking this category 1 climb, you can go from nowhere to podium. And in one stage, if you could win every climb of the day.
Yeah, well, it's 10 points, isn't it, for a category 1 climb, and 20 for that high category climb that we've got at the summit of today's stage.
Pressure's on for Visma Lisa Bike, and that is Jonas Vingegaard nursing the polka dot jersey on behalf of Tadej Pogačar, who owns it, at least at the start of today. Look how solid Adam Yates is. He's hewn out of granite, isn't he? Everyone has some lateral movement, except for Adam Yates, who seems like he's been set in stone since birth from the waist up. Amazing.
Yeah, incredibly solid, and what a ride from him yesterday. It's one thing to get the instruction from your team leader to go on the attack when everybody's on their limit. It's just quite another thing to do it like Adam Yates did, and just absolute perfect teamwork. But what it takes to be able to do that is mind-blowing.
And it was great, wasn't it? We heard the interview from Adam Yates this morning, who said, Tadej Pogačar had a conversation with him just before he attacked to tell him to attack, and he said, "What on earth are you talking about? What do you mean I need to attack?"
How did it come out of Adam Yates? What are you on about?
Yeah, that was it. What are you on about? I need to attack.
He spoke so quickly, Tadej didn't hear what he said in reply, so he had to do it. Here is descent through the Lasse. Quite technical, this high-paced, absolutely amazing race. the leaders separated by 1 second on the finale. It could end in a sprint between the pair of them, Danny. Amazing.
Yeah, it is amazing, especially after the day they had yesterday on blockhouse ascent, which they had to tackle twice. So it is going to come down to the wire, and definitely not one to miss.
What about this? Let's see how the descent is indeed dealt with. Now, there are a series of steps. As you can see, they've cut into the mountain, and then you come... It's almost like one of those roller coaster moments where you just come to the peak of each little peaklet, and then all of a sudden you're going very, very rapidly once again downhill. Now, it's modest at the moment at 68. Picking up 70, you'll hear the ebb and yaw of the motorcycle as he tries to take these corners. The squeak as well of the double wheels up front taking the loading into the corners. Absolutely ideal machines, to be honest, for camera bikes. And in fact, when you see them, you realize that you can actually park them up as well, and they stay standing. You don't have to mess around with a foot stand. So the cameraman can jump off the back as well, leave the bike indeed in a position where they're ready to get away. It's a fabulous piece of machinery, and it copes extraordinarily well with these very focused turns that we're dealing with. Not at our highest pace just yet, but you're going to get that in about 5k time. The motorcycle's complaining, and sometimes, Robbie, they have to be completely on their guard just to stay away from the riders.
That's the thing on these technical descents, that the motorbikes aren't as agile as the riders on their race machines, so they have to give themselves a bit of distance to stay away. And what you often hear and can make the riders a little jumpy is when the motorbike will go around one of these hairpins, really having to tip it in with two people sitting on top of it, and they can bottom out and scrape the underneath where the stand is mounted underneath the bike. It's either the pegs, it can sometimes be the stand, and it gives that big scrape. The sparks fly off, and as a rider you need to be prepared for that's going to be part of what's happening on the way down, but it can make people a little bit jittery. But this descent, as you said, it goes down in sort of steps on the easier gradients at the moment. It's the bottom half of this descent, or the last 1/3 of the descent, that goes down at -9 and -10% gradient, so that the speeds really become high on the lower slopes.
See, on some of the straighter sections, the motorcycle's just trying to skittle away from the riders. Yeah, I've seen riders hurling advice, should we put it that way, at the cameras to indeed give them some space. I mean, we have the very, very best of the camera units provided by Eurometer. They are amazing. And these guys as well, they will jimmy up the crowd further ahead down the road. They'll basically get, I don't know, a bunch of school kids into a frenzy so that everyone's going crazy when they come by. And they are very much part of the development of the atmosphere of the race. And here we go, 74 kilometers per hour. This is where we're getting to the steeper sections. You can see the motorcycle here just doing its level best. And even at those speeds, it does not look fast at the moment. But believe me, Robbie, it most certainly is.
Oh, I believe you. I know it. I've done this descent a number of times. I've ridden almost an identical stage to this a couple of times as well. And I'm just, looking at it, having those memories come back of what a day of suffering this is. And it doesn't matter where you are in the field, racing to make the time cut or racing to win the stage, everybody's in pain. Here's the confirmation of the top of the climb. Javier Romo, 10 points for him. Carapaz and Aramburu, he was leading Romo up there, just trying to keep everything together at a nice high pace. As they push out now towards 2 minutes, Richard Carapaz, the man pushing the pace on the descent. It's a perfect place to open up a gap over the peloton led by Visma Lisa bike, who are maybe just going with a little bit in reserve to keep Jonas Vingegaard safe and not make any silly mistakes.
Yeah, they won't be taking any risks behind, will they? Like you said, something that I was given advice from, actually, from Alex Dowsett, a former professional. He won a Giro time trial stage in treacherous conditions, and he told me to use a kind of map feature on my head unit. So some of the riders might be using that, have the GPX file plugged into their head unit, so they'll be able to see the severity of these tight bends. They'll know how much speed they need to scrub off. Just another little bit of I guess intervention that we've had over the last few years that can just lend a helping hand in some of these really technical descents.
I am very much looking forward to hearing from Matt Stevens in a short while. He might well have got scuffed elbows the way that they're going around these corners. Yeah, you can hear the squeal of the brakes, Robbie. They're giving it a lot of respect. It was clearly highlighted at the top of the day.
Oh, Bob Youngles, he's just got his hands full trying to follow this group. We saw him just go really wide in that left-hander just a moment ago. And that's the thing when you get in a group like this. If you're not the greatest descender, you're going to cost yourself quite a lot of energy and a lot of frayed nerves as well, just trying to keep up with the better descenders.
Oh, it's awful. I wasn't a great descender myself, and it wasn't just physically hard, but mentally it takes so much out of you. You have to be so focused throughout a descent, and if you're losing time on every corner, then you're having to make those little accelerations as and when you can. But even more so, that stress that it puts on you actually makes it more dangerous, because you have to kind of take little risks here and there, maybe take the wrong line, so you just don't want to be in that position on the back foot.
Meanwhile, up at the head of the course, the Col de Portet d'Aspet. Now, this is absolutely relentless. It's very short, but incredibly sharp. We don't dip below 9.2% throughout it, Robbie.
Very short, but feels very long. It's
Yes,
a really
amazing.
tough climb, especially when you've already done the Col de Monte at around 10% gradient. Then you've got that descent, your legs can start to seize up a little bit, and you go into a dip and immediately onto the steep pinches that take you up the Porte d'Aspet, and it is a really, really tough climb. And they're climbing the steeper side today.
Just looking, I think we might have been on a kicker before we actually get to the foot of it. Let's wait and see. That was a spiteful little interlude, I must admit. So yeah, the Col de Portet d'Aspet slams into 14% very, very quickly. The average don't really dip below 8.7. We hit 12 and 10 as well deeper in, but the steepest part of it is actually at the entrance to it, Robbie.
Yeah, the lower slopes are the steepest. So it's like hitting a wall when you get onto it, and very difficult to find your rhythm straight away because it's so steep. Just takes so much power. It's a very hard climb just to find any sort of tempo.
Well, it's going to be the feature of the day. We do have a long reach once we're over the top of this climb. In fact, we'll have a downhill run which, to various levels of intensity, will take us over the next 25 kilometres from the peak of the Col de Portet d'Aspet, and then the road with a false flat ascent begins to pick up from 100 k's out all the way to the peak of the Col d'Agnes, which is a double peak, rather unkindly today. We get no classification at all on the Port de l'Air, a mountain we've actually taken in reverse in the past and has been a major feature. The side we're coming up from, in the little dip, if you like, the centre of the M at the top of what lies ahead of us, 4.4 kilometres at 5.4%. So not the most testy today, but there we start thinking about launch pads. I never quite know where the attacks are going to come, Robbie, in this year's race. It's been unfathomable on some days, and even the word is hard to say, as you've just heard.
That's the thing that's really been a highlight of this tour for me, is that the attacks have been very hard to predict where they're going to come. When we see the likes of Tadej Pogačar, Remco Evenepoel, the way they were attacking on the gravel stage from long range, accelerations that have come, maybe not in a tactical sense of winning the stage, but just to hurt rivals. Just to take an opportunity when something presents itself to make somebody else work harder than they would ever want to. But today, with this breakout in front, by the time they get over this next climb, the Porte d'Aspet, they do, as you just mentioned, they have that really long reach. So from the top of the Aspet, then through to the next climb of the day is almost 65 kilometres. That's where this break have got to concentrate their efforts. Yes, you've got to concentrate them on the climb, but it's much easier then to get on a climb and ride the rhythm required, and you can only go as fast as your legs will let you, but it's a major effort that it just seems normal to be making it there. You've really got to push yourself and push the group and be cohesive on this big 65-kilometre valley section that they're going to get if they're going to be any chance whatsoever of winning this stage.
Tell you how unpredictable it is and how unkind this year's race has been to certain riders. Ben Healy, he should have had a couple of stage wins by now, to my mind. There's been perfect days for him where, had it not been for the strategies that have kind of revealed themselves behind him, he would have got there. And today, I kind of feel that he's going to be in the service of Richard Carapaz, so he's not going to get his win again. But, you know, he won't mind that, provided a win comes into the team, and they have richly deserved it. Finally, after that spiteful little kicker that we had earlier on, we begin this test. The Col de Portet d'Aspet, and you can see immediately how shredding this is, Robbie. This is amazing.
Yeah, it is just so very steep. Massive crowds already installed here on the road, and they'll be making their way up towards what we mentioned before, the memorial to Fabio Casartelli, the Italian from the Motorola team who lost his life descending in the opposite way to the race going today, back in 1995. He was the Olympic champion of Barcelona 1992.
I remember the games. That was the first summer games that I worked on with Eurosport, as it was now, of course, part of our Discovery Warner Brothers family. 4 kilometres to go. Fabio Casartelli, the memorial. It's a beautiful one, John.
Yes, it is. This memorial was made by the sculptor Bruno Luzzani in white and grey marble, representing a white Ferris wheel, and then it blossoms into an Olympic flag. So a memorial that pays tribute to Fabio Casartelli.
Just look at the pace and the determination that is being displayed on your screens right now. If you've got your chances, you have to take them. When they come, Robbie, is something else. Is this a chance? A chance to make a statement?
It's a chance, but if we look back to the Tour of last year, we had the two major teams trading blows. UAE one day would be on the front, pushing the pace, and then Vingegaard would take time over Pogačar. The next day, Visma would ride on the front, and then Pogačar would take time over Vingegaard. I think Visma really, and we saw it from their interview today, that they said it really went well for Jonas yesterday, and it's about what we expected, and pretty pleased with how we went on a climb that didn't suit Jonas with its lower gradients. It's a bit more suited to a more powerful climber like Tadej Pogačar. They really are believing, and they're showing it in the way they're riding, that they believe in Jonas today on this course with these climbs, these gradients. And if they can keep it hard all day, they believe that Jonas will have the upper hand when it comes to the slopes of the Plateau de Bay.
A general headwind we were expecting at the finale today. That's ebbed, apparently, according to the weather forecast. I know that there's plenty of lassé as well, so you're going in every which way as far as directions are concerned, and that headwind. But I think this is, from what we saw just before, Visma Lease bike, they do want to show their strength and their belief in today, and that transmits itself to a rider like Jonas Vingegaard, who sports the polka dot jerseys today, the polka dot jersey today on behalf of Tadej Pogačar. My feeling is that it's quite a decisive day, if only psychologically, Robbie.
Well, it could be decisive for the entire tour, because although we think we know the balance of power, it can change so quickly. We think back 12 months ago, and Tadej Pogačar then suddenly just blew to pieces, lost so much time. The year before that on the Col de Gran, same thing. We thought he had both Roglic and Vingegaard under control, and then he blew up on the final climb and lost himself more than 2 minutes, and that was the tour done there. So Visma Lease bike, they realised that today, yes, it could be a psychological blow if he can match Pogačar, take a little bit of time back, but also realise it's a massive opportunity to wrestle the lead off Tadej Pogačar all in one go. And it's also not the last opportunity to do that, because we're only entering now the final 7 stages of this tour, and there's plenty more climbing to come in the Alps as well.
Well, I guess the hope is that a repeat of stage 11 into Lyon, where Vingegaard got, I think it's fair to say, possibly an unexpected victory in that drive for the line, mano a mano with Tadej Pogačar. Don't be surprised today if indeed it turns out to be a battle between the pair of them again. Yesterday, how much do you read into today compared to yesterday? Well, they're all different days, and I just feel like Jonas Vingegaard is growing into the race, but I just wonder how much he's missing Sepp Kuss, Robbie.
Well, that's one thing, missing Sepp Kuss, but you can only go as fast as you can go on the climb, no matter who you've got in front of you. What my concern for Jonas Vingegaard has been going into this tour and throughout it, where people say, well, Vingegaard, he's only going to get better through the tour. The more racing, the better he's going to get. I don't subscribe completely to that theory. I think for a while, yes, you ride yourself in, and he's coming in with a certain level of freshness, even though we know where he's come from injury-wise and lack of racing. He has done a lot of training. But I also believe I think there should, or it's reasonable to expect there could come a point in this race where that upward trajectory is no longer upward. It plateaus off and even starts going back the other way due to a lack of foundation. All those weeks of missed training, you can catch up with intensity, doing training camps, cramming in as much as you possibly can. But that long, smooth, uninterrupted run-in builds the foundation on which your form sits. And I won't be surprised if we got to a point where Jonas starts going back the other way and his form is then degrading.
I was actually thinking precisely the same thing, Robbie, and also that in another way, Tadej Pogačar, when are his Giro legs going to tell against him? Or indeed, do you think the way he's riding at the moment, he shows that actually he's carrying that form brilliantly and is undiminished?
Well, he is carrying the form brilliantly. There was a hiccup the other day and we thought, well, maybe this is the day and he should maybe conserve himself a bit more. I firmly believe it was a fueling issue with Tadej Pogačar on stage 11 to Le Lioran. He's seemed to have rectified that situation, rode aggressively yesterday with the team. But the question still remains, can he keep that up through the final 7 days? A week is a long time in the Tour de France, especially when it's the third week.
Very much so. And indeed, of course, we've had 14 days of racing, let's not forget, bisected by a rest day. Today will take us to the second rest day. And what battle plans may remain after that? Well, we've got a quality group now here up front. We have Richard Carapaz, who just hoving in on Simon Yates. Many people's pick for today, actually. I don't know who you picked today, Robbie.
Well, in our competition here on the breakaway show, our predictor, I was fourth pick today, and I went with Carlos Rodriguez. We all went for GC contenders, the top four on GC, so nobody went out on a limb. All marking each other at this point we are. But then for fun, we said, well, why don't we pick also a rider for a breakaway? So we've got to ignore the top 10 on GC and pick riders for the break. And for that one, I think Danny Rowe went with Simon Yates.
Good pick, yep.
I can't remember who Adam Manola went for, but I went for Ben Healy. And he's now in the group. Someone went for Carapaz.
Well, all good picks, to be honest. And don't be surprised if this thins down as a group and gets ever more selective. Let's see what kind of riders as well can carry us through the great plateaus as we come down into the valley off the top of this, which we still have to deal with. We saw it hit 11% not long ago, and it was matched by the pace at 11 kilometers per hour. It's taking a long time to get to the top of this, with 2 kilometers remaining before we get there. Little bit of respite, not overly described on the climb itself, but it kicks up again before the top, and then we'll be heading down on not an overly technical descent, which will take us to a long reach before we get to our next climb. Some respite, but 1 minute and 14 only, Robbie. That gap is still closing.
Yeah, that's not good news for the break that they're being pegged at such a small gap, and in fact being just brought back a little bit under the impetus of, it was Wout van Aert who led them onto this climb. I haven't been able to see yet if it's still him leading, but the face of Bob Jungels tells us that this is getting close to maximal effort that you would be prepared to put in with 134 kilometres remaining. hurt is on.
The Luxembourger is known for being able to park the pain brilliantly. So back in the day, Liège-Bastogne-Liège going his way. Well,
Staged in the Tour a couple of seasons ago.
Phenomenal. And I remember him when he got it, and I think Dan Lloyd actually shed a tear because, of course,
he must have had something in his eye.
I think it was. Yeah, well, you know, when the servants of the sport actually come through to the top table, it's lovely when they can help themselves, and it can be a rarity, can't it, Robbie?
Oh, it can be when guys get an opportunity. Brilliant bike riders, but we don't often see them get that.
Yeah.
The opportunity or be in the position to win, and Bob Youngles did exactly that 2 seasons ago, 2022, into Châtel-le-Port-de-Soleil. Brilliant win, pushed himself beyond his limits, you'd say, because he was absolutely in pieces afterwards, emotionally and physically. What a day.
I think we all were, to be honest. 1,500 metres before we get to the top, just a little bit, as you can see, of a disengagement. Kwiatkowski was very busy yesterday. He's one of those that's suffered early today. And to climb straight out of the back door after the climbing that finished yesterday, Robbie, there's a level of cruelty to that is hard to... well, I was going to say it's hard to fathom. I understand why it was done. And this has, I think, will prove to be a critical day.
Well, it's the sort of day you see in the road book as a non-climber and just say, oh, no. I hope something happens that they need to change that stage and we don't need to start up a 7K climb. But aggression guaranteed, and we've got a really strong group off the front. They've got their work cut out.
Just behind the main group on the Porte d'Aspet. And thank goodness there's a little bit of shade offered up by the trees here. There's a dappled effect on the road. Riders starting to get dropped now from moving at 100 k's an hour, 115, 120 k's an hour earlier on. We are down to just 11 kilometers an hour behind this group. There are several riders that are being shelled as we go over the top, but it's absolutely beautiful here, but brutal. But a little bit of mercy for these riders as they're shielded from the sun. But I can still see the cars giving out ice to the riders, ensuring that they are fully hydrated. That is the name of the game. We cannot reiterate that enough. Keeping these riders cool, but thankfully nature doing its part briefly for the riders of the Tour on this climb. Back to the commentators.
Thank you, Matt. In the shaded lee of the mountain here, there is the Pogaluts being carried today by Jonas Vingegaard and his team, I think proving their strength at the moment. Yeah, questions were asked of him by some of the media yesterday as to whether he missed Sepp Kuss, and he said, yeah, sure, I miss him. But my team have done an amazing job so far. He wouldn't be saying anything else. And that he believes that they've got the strength still to remain competitive. I mean, the fact that he had to say it almost seems a strange one. It's not an unbridgeable gap at the top, Robbie, but it is starting to yawn at 1:57, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, 1:57, it doesn't seem like much. And on a climb like this one, for example, you're well within the same kilometre on the road as the yellow jersey, to put it in terms of how many metres that is, that time gap. But it is a lot to pull back. He's up against it, but we've seen Jonas Vingegaard do it over the last couple of years. Suddenly put a massive gap between himself and Tadej Pogačar. So his team absolutely believes in it. If he didn't believe in it, he wouldn't go along with this tactic of them, setting this strong pace and keeping the break in check. And it's not that they're so concerned about the break itself or wanting to ruin their chances of a stage victory. It seems like their plan is just make this race hard all day long, because if they can wear everybody down, they think that plays into the strengths of Jonas Vingegaard. So there will be people, fans out there, particularly fans of riders who have got themselves into the break, saying, why are Visma ruining it for these guys trying to be in the break? There's no danger on GC. Well, it's just not about that. It's a longer game that they're playing that has to do with trying to fatigue their rivals.
Yeah, almost accidentally catching the break to a certain extent. The likes of Guillaume Martin is up here for Cofidis. We'll be hoping that ebbs as the break flows. In fact, Lenny Martinez, the only other Frenchman left out front at the moment. Lenny's been coming and going, let's put it that way, in terms of his visage and his comfort levels. He really does, like an open book, show when he's really feeling the pain. That's been on a number of occasions. Unlike the Yateses, it's very hard to read them. They always look absolutely within themselves. And Simon Yates, brother of Adam, is up here. All sons of Adam, of course. 245 meters, less than that. And indeed, they're picking up the pace just a little bit as they come up to the top. More mountains points up for grabs. Who's going to reach out? We may have another sprintlet here for the points, Robbie.
Javier Romo, he's poised to try and take the points, making sure he's riding at or near the front. Richard Carapaz, just conspicuous in his absence. He dropped himself to the back of the group. And after having to play second fiddle to Romo over the top of the Col de Monte, maybe Carapaz has thought, you know what, I'm just going to save my energy and go for a stage victory rather than try and set myself up for the King of the Mountains competition.
Well, if that comes his way, it will have been well worth blowing out the candle, at least on this moment. But it looks like having a look-see on the barriers, couldn't quite see a way through. And in fact, we've rolled over here with Johannesson this time.
Well, less of a fight than the last one. Romo, you know, right up there, sort of edging towards getting the points, but just that final acceleration from Tobias Haaland Johannesson from UnoX Mobility gets top points.
And we'll get a definitive gap between the chase and those who are up the road in a short while. 9%, 8%, just coming off the maximum that we've had on this, which is rather cruelly nudged up to around 13% on occasion. You see that picking up as well graphically, I'm certain. Meanwhile, further back down the road, Jonathan Castroviejo just staying with it for now.
Carlton, just look up ahead of him, though. Look at Nils Pollitt, the big man. He is still hanging in there.
He's phenomenal.
And he's going to get over this climb. And if he is needed, anything needed from him for the UAE team, he's there to do the job. He is riding a phenomenal Tour de France.
And look at this. This is Jonas Vingegaard calling for a little bit of pace, even over the top. And the gap's coming down, 1:06. So we've got our definitive gap now to those out front as the clock continues to roll here. Just readjusting itself. Let's wait and see. Let's wait and see what it is. It looks like second by second it's almost counting itself. Usually the clock gets reset when that starts to happen. 131 kilometers of the day still to go. It feels like we would have done all of the climbing that was required. Well, think again. We've got around 5,000 meters of altitude gain today. We don't get to the highest altitude itself specifically, but so much climbing today added together. The air not as thin as it can be on some of the main alpine tests, but here in the Pyrenees the climbs come thick and fast, and this is a moment of respite. The biggest run now of as we hear one of the foot pegs of the motorcycles on the effects mic just starting to complain in some of the corners here. You may well see some or hear some of the brakes squealing as well. Minute 9, minute 8 is the gap as they come off this peak, and I've got to say the main contenders don't look overly harried so far, Robbie.
No, the main contenders are just sitting there. I wouldn't call it comfortably, but they're not under any real pressure for the climbing talents they possess. What I'm interested to see now is, at this point, we've got over the first of the major climbs. We've now got this 65-kilometre stretch until we get to the start of the Col de Agnes. And can this breakaway find some cohesion? They've been relying on Bob Jungels setting the pace on the climbs for the most part, but can they form one big team through and off, great big team time trial, and rip themselves a decent gap